G'day crew. In this video I'm going to talk about catching cuttlefish. It's very similar to catching squid, but there are a few differences. As you all know, squid and cuttlefish make great bait and terrific calamari. If you can keep them alive and use them for live bait, you can catch some really good fish. Alternatively, you can kill it, keep the tube to eat yourself, and use the head for bait. Whichever way you're going to use it, just remember, fresh is best. The cuttlefish ink is particularly nasty, much more so than squid ink. It's often ejected mixed with a thick mucus, and it doesn't seem to matter how often the cuttlefish squirts their ink out, there's always more to come. It's not something that I'm really keen to try, but I have read that some people cook with the ink to add a sweet flavour to the food and give it a slightly darker tint. Just one other point about the ink. Whenever you drop the cuttlefish into water, first thing it does is squirt out some ink. So if you're keeping them for live bait, make sure you've got them pointed in a safe direction when you drop them into the water. To me, cuttlefish have always seemed to be the most attractive of the cephalopods. Having said that, it wouldn't take a lot to convince me that they arrived on this planet by a UFO. They are such a different animal. In case you haven't heard the term cephalopods before, it encompasses cuttlefish, squid, octopus, and the nautilus species. It's a subcategory of mollusks, which also includes snails, slugs, mussels, cockles, and clams. I've heard quite a few people lately saying that cephalopods make up the largest biomass on the planet. I believed them when I heard it, and I even started repeating that myself until I did a bit of research for this video. Cephalopods are part of the larger mollusk family, and as you can see in the image on the screen, they are certainly not the largest biomass on the planet. When you think about it logically, plants have to be the largest biomass, otherwise there wouldn't be enough for animals to eat to survive. But you're here to hear about catching cuttlefish for a feed or to use it for bait, so I'll try not to get too sidetracked onto the ecological science, but I will just talk about their origin and their life cycle for a moment, because it has a bearing on their sustainability. The earliest fossil record of cephalopods dates back to the early Cambrian period. That's some 538 million years ago. So they've been around for a long time. In short, they're real survivor types. There's been billions of species that have gone extinct in that same time period, and I mean literally billions of species. Okay, next trip out's going to be looking for some cuttlefish and probably trolling for some mackerel, but this video is concentrating on the cuttlefish part of it. 2 trips ago I had some trouble hooking up. I was sort of only getting about half the hits that I got as a hookup, sometimes maybe even a little bit under 50%. Last time I was out I did better than that. I was probably getting 70%, 75% of hookups for every hit I got on them. But I've heard that cuttlefish take the centre of the jig and you've got to strike hard to get them down to the bottom, which is what I've been doing for the last couple of years that I've been hunting cuttlefish on jigs. But it doesn't seem to be quite good enough. So anyway, getting ready for this trip out, I was looking around and I spotted these Jarvis Walker Razorback jigs. And what they've got is some spikes on the centre of the back to go with the spikes on the bottom, which you normally get on a squid jig. But they've got these spikes on the centre of the back, so if the squid takes it in the middle, chances are he's going to get hooked on them. I thought that was a really good idea. It's got the luminous belly as well. So I like the luminous jigs for a squid and cuttlefish. Always seem to do better on them. So I thought I'd give these a go. I've got 2 big ones and 2 small ones. And I'm going to set them up on a paternoster style rig with the small one on top and the big one on the bottom. I'll show you how I make them shortly. But I've got one made up here. I've got a couple of mustad fast attach here. One on the top and one for the bottom squid jig. And I've got this other type of clip on the top of it because the way I've made it, there is actually a top and bottom to the rig. So I put this on as a different clip. You could have used another mustad fast attach, but then you'd have to look at the rig and decide which was the top and which was the bottom. So I had some of these, I put on a different clip so I can just, when I'm out there, I know which way is up. So to make the rig, what I've got here is I've got some 15-pound, well, fluorocarbon, but mono would be fine. I just happen to have this little bit left over and I thought I'd use it up. And I've got some 30-pound tough trace. Anything around 30-pound will be fine. Anything around 15-pound is fine, like 10 to 20 pounds is fine for the main. And I'd go 30 to 40, 50 for the branch. I'll show you why shortly. And then I just had the one different clip for the top of the rig just so I could differentiate the top from the bottom. I got the Mustad fast attachers to put the squid jigs on. I love them for squid jigs. You can change your colours or jigs out really quickly. And the only other thing you need to make this rig is a pair of scissors to cut the line, and I use a gas lighter. Any sort of gas lighter will do, just to mushroom the end of the mono so that the line can't undo. And the other thing I'm going to do when I'm out there is try the baited squid jigs again. I did try them a little bit over a year ago without much success, but that was my fault. I rigged them up as a paternoster rig and that didn't go so well. This time I'm going to rig them up under a float, just a single squid spike with a bait on it under the float. I'll show you that rig shortly. I've already got that made up, but I'll show you what it is shortly. But this came with it. These are the stops for the float. So you put the peg in the tube and that pinches the lines so you can set the depth that the squid spike stays under the float. So I want to keep it about half a metre off the bottom. That's what I'll be setting it for. And just these came with it. They're a couple of chemical light sticks. If I use it at night time, I might try one of them, see if it makes any difference. I don't know whether it will or not, but can't hurt to try it. I'll set up and make a rig for you just to show you exactly how I make that. I'm using some heavy line and some light line. The light line can be anything from say 10 to 15 pound. The heavy line you want to be heavier. There's a reason for it which we'll show later. I'm using something about 50 pound here. 60 pound is fine. 30 pounds probably okay. But anyway, what I've done is the light line I've put about 20 to 30 centimetres of line longer than the heavy line. Then pinch them both together, come back about that far, what's that, about 10-15 centimetres, and then make a loop in both lines like that. And then pass both lines back through that loop. As soon as this is heavy, I don't need to go quite as many times. I'm going to go back through that 3 or 4 times. And then moisten it up. A little bit of saliva is good for that. And grab both ends and pull it down tight. Cinch that down as tight as you can, like that. Okay, this that we left here is going to be the top end of our dropper. And the idea of tying it this way is that when it's sitting in the water, that knot tends to stay up and keep the squid jig away from the main line. Now I know the squid jig's weighted and it's going to pull down, but with a little bit of current it should still keep it away from the main line. That's the theory behind it anyway. Separate your line out so that you've got the heavy line that's going back to your main spool of line, separated out from the other 3 components, and then cut it off and leave 3 or 4 mils of tag end sticking out. And then pinch that between your fingers so you're protecting the knot behind your fingernails. And get a cigarette lighter, just burn that down to create a mushroom on the end of the heavy line. That way, if for any reason you get snagged and there's a bit of tugging on this line, the knot won't pull through. You might break your light line, but your knot's not going to let go. Now, for the other end of it, we'll get a bit of line out and just cut that off. Bearing in mind that this end that we've already tied is our top end, so we want to go in the same direction for this one. Okay, so this time, this end that's going back to the spool for our heavy line is the end that we want, because that's pointing upwards in the same direction as the first one we tied. So about that much should do. Cut it a bit longer, doesn't matter. We need to tie onto it, and then the tag end that we've got left over, trim that off and mushroom that end again. Now on the top end I'm going to put one of these, and just a uni knot on, that's fine. Because this is thinner line, I'm going to do about 7 or 8 wraps on the uni, and then we'll tie a couple of fast attach clips on here. Again, just with a uni knot will do. Okay, so the idea here is we've got the 2 dropper loops, for want of a better word, ready to attach our squid jigs to. I've left tag end here. You can put a heavier sinker on the bottom of it to help that go down. Probably a teardrop sinker or something. An ounce or so should be plenty. Maybe even go a little bit lighter than that. The squid jigs themselves have got some weight in them, but if you're going after the calamari and arrow squid at the deeper depths, you'll need some extra weight on them. And I like to jig vertically, so a bit of extra weight, even up to 2 ounces, depending on the rod you're using, might not be too bad. Just try it and see if the line's going too far behind the boat as you're drifting. Put a bit of extra weight on, try and hold it a bit more vertical. And that's it, that's the rig I use. This is the rig I've got for setting up the squid jig for the baited squid spike. This is the plate I bought. It's just a El Chivo plate. Got the plate stopper up top here. Got the tube there, little pin that goes with it. Stick the pin in, push it down tight, locks it onto the tube, and that stops the plate going up. I've also double looped the line through the plate. That also helps hold it in place. And I put the piece here, this bottom piece here, where you put the light stick. If you're using a light stick, you poke it in there. Number 4 ball sinker on it to give it some weight. That's going to sit down on top of the squid jig that I put on there, or squid spike, because it's not a jig, it's a spike that you actually bait. And a mustard fast attach on there. Now I've got some hooks on here, but that's just an old rig that I had, and I've just put them on there so that I can hook it up on the handle of the rod to store it. I'll take that off and substitute the jig when I'm ready to use it, but the jig doesn't hook in anywhere, so these are just there for storage. It's an old Shimano rod that will tip break off it. I didn't throw it out. It'll be fine for this. All it's going to do is sit in the rod holder and catch a squid, I hope, as I drift over them. See how it goes. There's a number of different subspecies of cuttlefish, and the growth rates vary between them, but they usually range between 1.4 and 3.3 centimetres per month, so they're fairly rapid growers. The females reach reproductive maturity between 6 and 10 months of age, and males mature at roughly the same time. The typical life expectancy of a cuttlefish is about 1 to 2 years. What this means for anglers is that the cuttlefish grows very quickly, and most species lay between 100 and 1,000 eggs. While a large number of these are accounted for by predators, it's unlikely that recreational anglers will have a large impact on the population, so long as everyone sticks to the bag limits. An interesting little bit of trivia is that cuttlefish possess a unique internal structure called the cuttlebone. It's a sort of internal shell. It's quite porous, and it's what allows the cuttlefish to adjust its buoyancy so it can float in the water column. I used to think that that was the same as the cartilage in a squid, and it has just got bigger and gotten harder, but it's not. It's totally different. If you catch a cuttlefish for eating, and you know anyone that's got a parrot or a budgie, keep the cuttlebone for the bird. They chew on it and sharpen their beaks. They love them. Now, another feature of a cuttlefish which is quite interesting for anglers is that they cannot see colour. Although a cuttlefish cannot see colour, it can perceive the polarisation of light, which enhances their contrast perception. Now, what that means for us is that the colour of the jig doesn't matter in the slightest. What does matter is the contrast of colours on the jig. So when I'm fishing for cuttlefish, I'm looking for contrasting colours on the jig, and I also like jigs that have some luminosity. I think the luminosity helps to enhance the contrast of the jig. Unlike mammals, where our blood is red and based on hemoglobin, a cuttlefish blood is based on hemocyanin, which is a copper-based protein. That reportedly makes the blood a shade of green-blue, although I've never actually seen the blood myself. Maybe they don't have enough blood in them to leak out onto the cutting board, I'm not sure. This is a recording from my chirp sounder of me working the squid jig. I was fortunate that the current and the drift were just right to allow me to position the jig in the sounder beam so you could see this. I'm letting it play through in real time so that you can see the motion of the jig as I work it. The idea is to move the jig up and down in the water column, trying to keep it a little bit off the bottom. I didn't always manage this perfectly, as witnessed by the amount of snotweed that I had to clean off from time to time. I don't know if this is the best movement to jig for cuttlefish, but it's been working for me pretty well so far. The majority of the best fish I've ever caught have been caught on fresh bait. Many moons ago I had a big bait and we used to go out for a week or more at a time. When the squid were around, I'd shine a spotlight down in the water at night time to bring them up near the surface, and then I'd shoot them with my bow and arrow. Next morning I'd take the fresh squid and catch some fish with it. Live squid works even better, but back in those days I'd never heard of a squid jig, so catching them dead was the best I could do. The snotweed in the area that I go for cuttlefish is a lot worse this year than it has been in the past, which makes me wonder if that's part of the reason why I'm not doing as well in this area as I have in the past. I've mentioned that the cuttlefish make great live bait. When I've caught cuttlefish on a jig, I've kept some for eating and used the rest for live bait. However, unless I get a lot in future, that's changed. With the cuttlefish I brought back from my last trip, my wife found a really delicious recipe for cooking them. Prior to that, when she cooked the cuttlefish, she liked them, but it wasn't her favourite meal. Now she's decreed that cuttlefish should not be wasted on feeding the fish. By the time she'd cooked this and we tried it, it was too late to get any video of it, but the next time I go out and catch some cuttlefish, I'll do a video and a catch and cook on it. It is delicious the way she does it. Even if you eat the cuttlefish tube yourself, make sure you keep the heads and use them for fresh bait. Clean the tube out while you're out on the bait, use the head straight away for bait. Fresh bait like that is almost as good as live bait. You can catch some really big snapper on it. You can see their beak in there. It's trying to latch onto something, but oh, don't ink it again. This is something I experimented with last year. Well, if you could call a disaster an experiment, that is. My first idea of how to use these was, to put it kindly, wrong. Dead wrong. Now that I've had 12 months to think about it, I've come up with what I believe is a better idea. The cuttlefish have been quite slow this year, taking multiple drifts just to get a few on the jigs. I think I was averaging about 1 every 3 drifts when I was using the jigs. I think because this isn't a normal squid jig with some weight on it, that I might need a bigger sinker. Also need to keep away from the snotweed. That's not doing me any favours. I'm going to drop a number 6 KLIK sinker on with it. See if that helps me stay a bit more vertical. Just clear some of this snotweed off the hooks before I throw it back. Yeah. Okay, we need extra weight on it. with this setup. Oh, I missed him again. Huh, and he got my bait. Well, he'll be happy. Last time I was out, I decided to give the squid spike another try on the last couple of drifts. It worked a charm. Using the squid spike with a prawn for bait, I got 1 cuttlefish per drift. It was also hit by fish as well, which resulted in using about 6 prawns to get the 2 cuttlefish, the fish eating the other 4 prawns. Still, this one trip was very encouraging, and I'll certainly be using this more in the future. No matter how good a jig is, I still believe that real bait will always come up trumps. To rebait the squid spike, you need to take it off the line. For that reason, I use a mustad fast attach clip. I then tear the tail off the prawn and pass the squid spike through the prawn from the tail coming out the head. By tearing the tail off the prawn, it prevents it from covering the spikes, which might otherwise protect the cuttlefish from the spikes. We've got a decent one here. Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, you like my bait, don't you? Alright, now. Let you sit there for a bit. I'll see if I can get another one on the same prawn if I'm lucky. Oh, I might have to get some knotweed off that, have I? A little bit. Oh, bloody stuff. Aha, got one. A nice one. There we go. Didn't take long once it hit the water. Now just got to get used to how to use these. Okay. Don't you ink, will you? Oh, you did. Bloody did. Some in there cracked that bone at the back of his head, and that's him dead. You see his tentacles are gone all white. Now, next job is to get the guts out. Just get your finger in there and pull them out like that. If you're lucky, you won't break the ink cell back like I just did. There, did that one better. Ink sack's still intact. Either bring a bucket of water on board or lean over the side and give the mantle a thorough clean out. Otherwise you're going to end up with ink all through your esky. These are slippery suckers, so don't let go of it while you're doing this. That'll do for now. Finish that off when I get home. Okay, and that wraps up this video. I've shown you the gear I use. Make sure you put a little bit of extra weight on your squid jig when you're going for cuttlefish because you're going so much deeper for them. I put the track up roughly where I was going for them. I was fishing in 6 to 8 metres of water, and that's been pretty productive for me anywhere along that stretch from Raby Bay to Wellington Point in that sort of depth of water. Of course, you've got to get the right time of year. And as I said, I'll do a catch and cook next time I catch some, but we're getting towards the end of the season now, so if I don't get out and get some more cuttlefish this season, I'll do it next year. Until then, good fishing.